Ren did not cry anymore. He had run out of tears 3 winters ago when his mother first called him the spare blanket, the one you only use when the good blanket is in the wash. He was 17 years old now, with soft brown hair that fell into his eyes no matter how many times he pushed it back, and wrists so thin you could almost see the blue veins running underneath the skin like tiny rivers. He lived in a big house made of gray stone and dark wood. It was the kind of house that looked warm from the outside when the candles were lit in the windows, but inside it was as cold as a cellar where they keep the potatoes too long. Ren knew every cold corner of that house because he was the one who scrubbed them. His brother Soren was 18 and he was an alpha. That word meant something important in their kingdom. It meant you got the first slice of bread at dinner. It meant you walked through doors first. It meant people listened when you spoke, even if what you said was as useful as a bucket with a hole in it. Soren had slicked back black hair that always looked wet, like he had just come in from a light rain, and a smile that looked kind from far away but turned sharp when you got close. Soren was the good blanket. Ren was the one in the closet. The morning everything changed started like any other morning. Ren woke up on his thin mattress in the tiny room next to the laundry. It was not really a bedroom. It used to be a storage closet for mops and brooms, and even though Ren had moved the cleaning supplies to the hall cabinet, the room still smelled faintly of lemon polish and damp wood. He could hear the birds outside his one small window, and for a moment he just lay there watching the gray sky turn pale gold. Mornings were his favorite time because nobody was yelling yet. He got up and dressed in his plain brown tunic. His clothes were always brown or gray or faded black. Soren wore deep blue and forest green and sometimes a red vest with gold buttons that made him look like a prince in a storybook. Ren did not mind the brown clothes so much. What he minded was the way his mother looked at him when he walked into the kitchen. Ilara was already sitting at the long wooden table when Ren came in to start the fire. She was a tall woman with the same dark hair as Soren, pulled back so tight it made her eyebrows look permanently raised in disapproval. She was holding a letter with a red wax seal. The seal had a wolf's head on it. Everyone in the kingdom knew that seal. It belonged to General Salis Draven, the winter wolf of the northern armies. Ren saw the letter and his stomach dropped like a stone into a deep well. He knew what that letter meant. Every family with an Omega child had to send them to serve the general for 1 year. It was a law as old as the stone walls of the castle. The Omegas were called helpers, but everyone whispered the other name for them. Disposable Omegas. The general was known to be harsh and cold, and he went through helpers the way a fire goes through kindling. Most came back with hollow eyes or did not come back at all. Soren came down the stairs loudly, his boots making heavy sounds on each step so everyone would know he was arriving. He saw the letter and his handsome face twisted up like he had bitten into a rotten apple. "That disgusting thing came this morning," Ilara said, pushing the letter across the table toward Soren. "They expect my beautiful boy to go scrub floors for that scarred monster." Soren picked up the letter and read it, his lips moving slightly. Then he threw it on the floor. "I won't do it. I'm supposed to go to the capital for the winter dances. I'm supposed to meet important people. I'm not wasting a year in some frozen stone box waiting on a grumpy soldier." Ren stood very still near the fireplace, hoping if he did not move nobody would notice he was there. But of course they noticed. They always noticed when there was something unpleasant to hand off to him. Ilara's eyes drifted over to Ren and something cold settled in her gaze. It was the look she got when she was doing math in her head, adding up what she could gain and what she could lose. Ren had seen that look many times. It meant she had found a use for the spare blanket. "Ren will go," she said simply. Soren blinked and then his sharp smile returned. Yes, of course. Ren will go. Nobody at the general's castle knows what I look like. They only know the family name and that we have an Omega son. Mother, we can just send Ren and tell them he is me." Ren's hands started to shake. He pressed them flat against his legs so nobody would see. "Mother, please. I don't want to go to that place. I've heard stories about the general. They say he has a temper like a winter storm." Ilara stood up from her chair very slowly. She walked over to Ren and for one strange moment Ren thought she might hug him. She had not hugged him since he was very small and he could barely remember what it felt like. But she did not hug him. She slapped him hard across the face. The sound was sharp and clean like a book dropping on a stone floor. Ren's cheek stung and his eyes filled with water even though he tried very hard not to let them. "You will go," Ilara said. Her voice was calm like she was telling him to take out the trash. "You will tell everyone that your name is Soren. You will serve the general and you will not embarrass this family. If you tell anyone the truth, if you shame us, I will make sure you have no home to come back to. Do you understand me?" Ren nodded because his throat was too tight to speak. He touched his cheek where the slap had landed. It was hot like a small sun was trapped under his skin. Soren was already walking toward the door, his boots making those heavy sounds again. He paused and looked back at Ren with that smile that was not really a smile. "Don't look so sad, little brother. Maybe the general will like you. Or maybe he'll send you back in pieces. Either way, it's not my problem anymore. That night Ren packed his things. He did not have many things to pack. One extra tunic that was even more faded than the one he was wearing. A wooden comb with 3 teeth missing. A small smooth stone he had found by the river when he was 10 years old. That stone was his only treasure because it fit perfectly in his palm, and when he held it tight he felt a little bit braver. He wrapped the stone in a cloth and put it at the bottom of his bag. He tried to sleep, but his mind kept showing him pictures of the general. Everyone knew the stories. General Salish Draven had a scar that ran from his left eyebrow down to his jaw. Some said he got it fighting a bear. Others said he got it when his best friend betrayed him in battle and tried to cut his throat. The general never smiled. His voice was like rocks grinding together. He lived in a castle made of dark gray stone at the northern edge of the kingdom where the snow never fully melted even in summer. The wind there howled like lonely wolves, and the servants whispered that the general's heart had frozen solid years ago. Ren did not sleep at all. The next morning a carriage came for him. It was not a nice carriage like the ones that took Soren to parties. It was a supply wagon with wooden wheels that squeaked and a driver who smelled like onions and did not speak a single word for the entire journey. Ren sat in the back among sacks of flour and barrels of salted fish. The road was bumpy and the wind cut through his thin cloak like it was made of paper. They traveled for 2 days. The land changed from green hills and farms to rocky ground and twisted trees that looked like skeletons reaching up from the dirt. The sky turned the color of old pewter. When the castle finally came into view, Ren's heart sank all the way to his shoes. It was not a fairy tale castle with bright banners and happy guards. It was a fortress. The walls were high and thick and black with moisture. The windows were narrow slits that looked like suspicious eyes watching him approach. There were no flowers anywhere. No gardens. Just stone and cold wind and the distant sound of soldiers training somewhere behind the walls. The driver stopped the wagon and pointed at the main gate. Then he turned the wagon around and left Rin standing alone in the courtyard with his small bag clutched to his chest. The wind immediately bit at his cheeks and made his eyes water. A guard with a flat face and a scar on his chin led Rin inside without asking his name. The hallways were long and dark and smelled like old smoke and metal. Their footsteps echoed off the stone walls and Rin felt very small. Smaller than he had ever felt in his closet bedroom back home. They stopped in front of a heavy wooden door banded with black iron. The guard knocked once and then pushed the door open and shoved Ren inside without a word. The door closed behind him with a sound like a tomb sealing shut. The room was large and cold. A fire crackled in a massive fireplace, but it did not seem to make the room any warmer. Maps covered one entire wall. A big wooden table sat in the center covered with papers and a sword that looked like it had seen many battles. And standing by the window with his back to Ren was General Salish Draven. He was taller than Ren had imagined. His shoulders were wide and his hair was dark like a raven's wing. When he turned around, Ren saw the scar. It was real. It ran from his brow down his cheek like a crack in marble. His eyes were the color of winter ice and they looked at Ren with no warmth at all. "You are the Omega from the House of Soren," the general said. His voice was deep and rough like he had not used it for anything but giving orders in a very long time. "You look like a stiff breeze would snap you in half." Ren opened his mouth to speak, but his voice came out as a tiny squeak. He cleared his throat and tried again. "I am Soren. I am here to serve you for 1 year." The lie tasted like ash in his mouth. He thought of his mother's slap and his brother's cruel smile, and he kept his eyes on the floor. The general walked toward him slowly. Each step was deliberate and heavy. He stopped right in front of Ren, and Ren could smell leather and wood smoke and something sharp like winter air. The general reached out and Ren flinched. He could not help it. His body expected another slap. But the general just lifted Ren's chin with one rough finger so he could look at his face. His ice-colored eyes moved over Ren's features slowly. He looked at the fading bruise on Ren's cheek where Alara had hit him. He looked at the dark circles under Ren's eyes from 2 sleepless nights. He looked at the way Ren's thin cloak hung on his bony shoulders. "You have a bruise?" the general said. His voice was flat, but there was something underneath it. Something that sounded like a question. Ren swallowed hard. "I fell down the stairs before I left home." It was another lie. Ren was getting good at lying and he hated it. The general let go of his chin and stepped back. "You are here to work. You will clean the floors and the hearths. You will bring my meals and you will take away the empty plates. You will not touch my maps. You will not speak unless I speak to you first. If you break anything, I will send you back to your family with a note that says you are useless. Do you understand?" Ren nodded. "Yes, General." For 3 days Ren did nothing but scrub. He scrubbed the stone floors in the great hall until his knees were raw. He scrubbed the soot from the fireplaces until his hands were cracked and bleeding in 3 places. He carried heavy buckets of water up and down the stairs until his arms shook and his back ached like an old man's. The general ignored him completely except to point at a spot Ren had missed or to tell him he was too slow. The other servants avoided Ren. They whispered when he walked by. They knew he was an Omega sent to serve the Winter Wolf, and they looked at him with pity or fear or both. Ren ate his meals alone in the kitchen after everyone else had finished. The food was plain, but there was plenty of it, and Ren was so hungry from working that he ate every bite. On the fourth night a storm came. It was a wild storm with wind that screamed around the castle towers and rain that hit the windows like handfuls of gravel. The fire in the great hall kept going out from the drafts, and Ren was on his knees trying to get it started again when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned expecting the general with another complaint about the dust on the mantle. But it was not the general. It was Soren. Ren's brother stood in the doorway of the great hall dripping wet from the storm. His black hair was plastered to his forehead and his fine clothes were soaked through. He looked furious and cold and dangerous. "What are you doing here?" Ren whispered. He was so shocked he forgot to be afraid. Soren walked into the room leaving wet footprints on the clean floor Ren had scrubbed that morning. "I came to see if you were dead yet. Clearly you are not. You are supposed to be miserable. You are supposed to fail so Mother can tell everyone I would have done better." "I am miserable," Ren said quietly. "What do you want, Soren?" Soren looked around the great hall with greedy eyes. His gaze landed on a silver candlestick on the mantel. Then it moved to a set of silver spoons on a side table. The general had eaten his evening meal in this room and the servants had not yet cleared the table. "I want those," Soren said pointing at the spoons. "They are solid silver. I can sell them in the next town. The general will think you stole them. He will throw you out or worse. Then I can come back and be the hero who offers to serve in your place. The family honor will be restored and I will look noble and selfless." Ren stood up slowly. His knees hurt and his hands were wrapped in rags to stop the bleeding from the scrubbing. He looked at his brother standing there in his wet expensive clothes demanding that Ren help him steal. "No," Ren said. The word hung in the cold air between them. "What did you say?" Soren's voice went low and dangerous. "I said no. I will not help you steal from the general. He has been cold to me but he has not been cruel. He gives me food and a place to sleep. I will not repay that by robbing him." Soren's face contorted with rage. He grabbed Ren by the front of his tunic and shoved him hard against the stone wall. Ren's head hit the stone and bright lights danced in his vision. "You worthless little nothing," Soren hissed. "You will do what I say or I will make sure you never see the outside of these walls again." A door creaked open. General Salish Draven stood in the doorway. He was wearing a simple white shirt and dark pants. His scar looked deeper in the firelight. His ice-colored eyes took in the scene before him. Soren's hand gripping Ren's tunic. Ren pressed against the wall with fresh tears on his cheeks. The silver spoons glinting on the table. "What is this?" The general's voice was quiet. It was the kind of quiet that comes right before a very big storm. Soren immediately let go of Ren and smoothed down his own wet clothes. He put on his best charming smile. "General, thank goodness you are here. I came to warn you. This servant was trying to steal your silver. I caught him in the act. I was just holding him until the guards arrived." Ren could not breathe. His own brother was standing there lying as easily as breathing. And the worst part was that it might work. Who would believe a disposable Omega over a handsome Alpha in fine clothes? The general walked into the room slowly. He did not look at the silver spoons. He did not look at Soren. He looked at Ren. He looked at the fresh mark on the back of Ren's head where it had hit the wall. He looked at the rags wrapped around Ren's bleeding hands. He looked at the way Ren was shaking like a leaf in that same storm wind. "Who are you?" the general asked Soren. Soren puffed out his chest. "I am a concerned citizen of this kingdom. I was passing by and saw this thief through the window." The general turned his gaze to Ren. "And who is he to you?" Ren opened his mouth. The lie was right there. He could say Soren was a stranger. He could protect his brother and keep the family secret. But something inside Ren broke. Maybe it was the crack on the head. Maybe it was the 3 days of scrubbing floors in silence. Maybe it was the fact that nobody had ever looked at him the way the general was looking at him now. Like he mattered enough to ask. "My brother?" Ren whispered. "He is my brother. I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not Soren. I am Ren. I took his place because my mother told me to. Because I am the spare blanket." The words tumbled out and once they started Ren could not stop them. He told the general everything. About the letter. About the slap. About Soren coming tonight to frame him for theft. When he was done he was crying and his nose was running and he felt like a complete fool. Soren's face had gone pale as milk. He is lying. He is a liar and a thief. General Salish Draven did something that surprised everyone. He laughed. It was not a warm laugh. It was a laugh like ice cracking on a frozen river. He walked over to Soren and grabbed him by the collar of his expensive wet coat. "You," the general said quietly, "are going to walk out of my castle right now. You are going to walk all the way back to your mother's house in the rain. And if I ever see your face again, I will remember that you tried to lie to me in my own hall." He shoved Soren toward the door. Soren stumbled and caught himself on the doorframe. He looked back once with pure hatred in his eyes and then he was gone into the storm. The general turned back to Ren. He pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket and handed it to him. It was soft and white and smelled faintly of pine. "Blow your nose," the general said. "Then sit down by the fire. You are done scrubbing floors for tonight." Ren took the handkerchief and pressed it to his face. His hands were trembling so badly he could barely hold it. "Why are you being kind to me?" Ren asked. His voice was small and broken. "I lied to you." The general walked over to the fireplace and stared into the flames. His scarred face looked sad in the orange light. "I know what it looks like when someone is trying to survive something. I know what it looks like when someone has been hit by the people who are supposed to love them. I know what betrayal feels like." He touched his scar absently. "My best friend gave me this. He sold our battle plans to the enemy for a bag of gold. I trusted him and he put a knife to my throat while I slept." Rin wiped his eyes and looked at the general. For the first time he did not see a cold monster. He saw a person who had been hurt very badly. Just like him. "From now on," the general said, "you do not scrub floors. You sit at my table. And I will find out exactly what kind of family throws away a boy who works until his hands bleed." Rin looked down at his wrapped hands. Then he looked up at the general. Something warm bloomed in his chest. It was small and fragile like a candle flame in a drafty room. But it was there. And outside the storm kept raging, but inside the dark stone castle, for the first time in a very long time, Rin felt something that might have been hope. The morning after the storm, Rin woke up in a bed. Not his thin mattress in the closet next to the laundry, not a pile of rags on a stone floor. A real bed with a wooden frame and a feather mattress and 2 wool blankets that smelled like cedar. He lay there for a long moment just feeling the warmth around him and wondering if he had died in the night and gone to some quiet peaceful place where nobody yelled and nobody hit and nobody called him spare. But then his hands throbbed and he remembered the scrubbing and the bleeding and the general handing him a white handkerchief. He was not dead. He was in a small clean room in the general's castle and someone had put him to bed like he mattered. He sat up slowly. His body ached everywhere. His knees were purple with bruises from kneeling on stone floors. His palms were wrapped in clean white bandages now instead of dirty rags. Someone had tended to him while he slept. The thought made his throat tight in a way he did not understand. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and his bare feet touched a soft woven rug. There was a small window in this room and through it he could see pale morning light and the tops of dark pine trees dusted with snow. He had never had a window before. A soft knock came at the door and Rin flinched automatically. His body still expected bad things. But the door opened and a round-faced woman with gray hair and kind eyes came in carrying a tray. She wore a simple brown dress and a white apron and she smiled at him like he was a normal person and not a secret or a burden. "Good morning, dear," she said. Her voice was warm like bread fresh from the oven. "I am Marta. I manage the kitchen and the household. The general told me to bring you breakfast and to make sure you eat every bite. He also said you are not to do any scrubbing today." Those are his exact words. Ren stared at the tray. There was a bowl of porridge with honey drizzled on top, a slice of dark bread with butter, a small pot of tea, and a red apple so shiny it looked like it came from a painting. He could not remember the last time someone had brought him food in bed. He could not remember if anyone ever had. "Why is he being kind to me?" Ren asked. His voice came out rough from sleep and from all the crying he had done the night before. Marta set the tray on a small table beside the bed and patted his shoulder gently. "The general does not explain himself to anyone, least of all to me. But I have worked in this castle for 12 years and I can tell you this. He is not a cruel man. He is a hurt man. And hurt people recognize other hurt people. Now eat your porridge before it gets cold." Ren ate the porridge. It was warm and sweet and it filled a hollow space inside him that had nothing to do with his stomach. He ate the bread. He ate the apple down to the core. He drank the tea. When Marta came back for the tray she looked pleased. "The general wants to see you in his study when you are dressed," she said. "There are clean clothes in the chest at the foot of the bed. They might be a little big but they are warm." After she left, Ren opened the chest. Inside were 2 tunics, one soft gray and one deep blue, and a pair of brown wool trousers and thick socks and a heavy green cloak lined with rabbit fur. Ren touched the fur lining with his fingertips. It was so soft. He had never owned anything so fine. He dressed slowly because his hands were still sore under the bandages and because he wanted to make the feeling last. When he looked at himself in the small mirror on the wall, he almost did not recognize the boy staring back. He looked less like a shadow and more like a person. The walk to the general's study felt different than it had the days before. The hallways were still dark and cold and the stone walls still dripped with moisture in places. But Ren was not carrying heavy buckets. His feet were warm in thick socks. The green cloak hung from his shoulders like a promise. When he reached the heavy wooden door with the black iron bands, he knocked softly. "Enter." The general's voice was still rough, but Ren was starting to hear the difference between his angry rough and his normal rough. This sounded like normal rough. Ren pushed open the door and stepped inside. The study was brighter than he remembered. A fire crackled in the big fireplace and several oil lamps were lit. The general sat at the large table covered with maps and papers. He was not wearing his formal uniform today. He wore a simple gray shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and Ren could see more scars on his forearms. Old ones. Faded ones. The general looked up and his ice-colored eyes moved over Ren from head to toe. "The clothes fit well enough," the general said. It was not exactly a compliment, but it was not a criticism either. "Sit down. Marta said you ate everything." "Good." Ren sat in a wooden chair across from the general. The chair had a cushion on it and Ren's bruised knees were grateful. He folded his bandaged hands in his lap and waited. He was good at waiting. He had spent his whole life waiting for things to get worse. The general leaned back in his own chair and studied Ren for a long quiet moment. The fire popped and a log shifted. Outside the wind was calm for once and the only sound was the soft rustle of papers when a draft moved through the room. "Tell me about your family," the general said finally. Ren swallowed. "I told you everything last night. My mother wanted Soren to stay home. She sent me instead. She told me to lie." "You told me the facts," the general said. "I want the story. I want to know what it was like growing up in that house. I want to know why you flinch when someone moves too fast. I want to know why your hands were already cracked and rough before you ever scrubbed a single floor in my castle." Ren looked down at his bandaged palms. The story. He had never told the story to anyone because nobody had ever asked. But the general was asking and his ice-colored eyes were patient in a way Ren had not expected. "I was small when I first understood I was not wanted," Ren began. His voice was quiet but steady. "I was maybe 5 years old. It was winter and very cold. Soren had a new coat with silver buttons. I had a coat that used to be his from 2 winters before. It was too big and the sleeves hung over my hands and there was a tear in the lining. I asked my mother if I could have a new coat too. She said new coats were for children who mattered. I did not ask for anything again after that." The general's jaw tightened almost invisibly, but he said nothing. He just listened. "When I was 7, Soren pushed me down the back stairs because I was singing while I swept the hallway. He said my voice was annoying and I sounded like a sick cat. I broke my wrist. My mother told the healer I fell out of a tree. She did not want anyone to know Soren had done it. I had to wear the wrap for 6 weeks and do all my chores with one hand. Soren laughed every time he saw me struggling with the water buckets." The fire crackled again. The general's hands were resting on the table and Ren noticed his knuckles were white. "When I was 10 there was a festival in the village. All the families went. Soren wore his red vest with the gold buttons. He looked like a prince. I was told to stay home and scrub the kitchen floor because someone had to watch the house. But really it was because my mother did not want people to see me next to Soren and notice how different we were treated. So I stayed home and I scrubbed the floor and I listened to the music from the village floating up the hill and I pretended I was there dancing." Ren paused. He had never said these things out loud. The words felt heavy leaving his mouth but also strangely light, like stones he had been carrying in his pockets for years were finally being set down one by one. "When I was 12, Soren told some of the village boys that I was an Omega who cried at night because I was scared of the dark. It was true. I did cry at night. But not because I was scared of the dark. I cried because I was lonely. The village boys started calling me Weeping Willow. They would pretend to cry when I walked past. Soren would laugh and throw his arm around them like they were his best friends. I stopped going to the village after that unless I had to." The general stood up abruptly. For a terrible moment Ren thought he was angry and was going to yell or send him away. But the general just walked to the fireplace and picked up a metal poker. He jabbed at the logs and sent a shower of orange sparks up the chimney. His back was to Ren and his shoulders were very tense. "Keep going," the general said. His voice was tight. "Are you angry at me?" Ren asked. His voice was very small. The general turned around and his face was not angry. It was something else. Something that looked like pain but older and deeper. "I am not angry at you," he said. "I am angry at people who are not in this room. Keep going." Ren took a shaky breath. "When I was 14, a traveling merchant came to the house. He was selling books. I had never owned a book but I loved to read. I taught myself using old letters my mother threw away. The merchant had a book of maps and faraway places. It cost 3 copper coins. I had saved 2 copper coins from finding them on the road over 2 years. I asked my mother for 1 copper coin to buy the book. She laughed and said books were for people who had futures. Then she gave Soren 5 silver coins to buy a new belt. The general set the poker down carefully. He walked back to the table and sat down heavily. He rubbed his scarred cheek with one hand. "Did your mother ever hit you often?" he asked. "Only when I made her notice me," Rin said. "If I was very quiet and very small and did all my work perfectly, sometimes she forgot I existed for days. Those were the good days. The slap before I came here was because I spoke. I said I did not want to go. I should not have spoken." The general leaned forward. His ice-colored eyes were intense and they held Ren's gaze like a gentle trap. "You should have spoken," he said firmly. "You should have screamed. You should have run. You should have done anything except believe that you deserve to be treated like nothing. Because you do not deserve that. You never deserved that." Ren's eyes filled with tears. He blinked hard but one escaped and ran down his cheek. He wiped it away quickly with the back of his bandaged hand. "Why are you being kind to me?" Ren asked again. "I am nobody. I am the spare blanket. I am disposable." The general reached across the table and took one of Ren's bandaged hands in his own large rough one. His grip was gentle like he was holding a baby bird. "Let me tell you a story now," the general said. His voice was low and even. "When I was a young soldier, not much older than you are now, I had a friend named Aldrich. We grew up together in the same village. We trained together. We fought together. We saved each other's lives more times than I can count. I trusted Aldrich with everything. My plans. My fears. My secrets." The general touched his scar again. "One night during a border war, Aldrich sold our position to the enemy. They came while we slept. Aldrich held me down and told them to kill me first because I was the better fighter and I would cause problems if I woke up. He smiled while he did it. He smiled. I managed to get free and I fought. I got this scar from his knife. I got 12 other scars that night from the enemy soldiers. I survived. Most of my men did not." Ren's eyes were wide. "What happened to Aldrich?" "I found him 3 months later trying to sell more secrets to another kingdom. I dragged him back in chains. The king wanted to execute him. I asked for a different punishment. I asked that Aldrich be sent to the northern mines to work for the rest of his life. I wanted him to wake up every morning in the cold and the dark and remember what he did. I wanted him to live with it." "Did it help?" Ren asked. "Making him suffer?" The general was quiet for a long moment. "No. It did not bring back my men. It did not erase the scar on my face. It did not make me trust people again. I have been alone in this cold castle for 7 years because I decided it was safer to push everyone away than to risk being betrayed again. And then you showed up." Ren blinked. "Me? You?" A boy in a thin cloak with a bruise on his cheek and hands already cracked from work. "You lied to me about your name but your eyes told the truth the whole time. I know what betrayal looks like, Ren. I know what it smells like. It smells like my own blood on a friend's knife. You were not betraying me. You were trying to survive. Just like I was." The general squeezed Ren's hand gently and then let go. He stood up and walked to a shelf on the wall. He pulled down a thick leather-bound book and brought it back to the table. "This is a book of maps," he said. "It shows every kingdom and every sea and every mountain range we know about. I'm going to teach you how to read it. Not because you have to earn your place here. You already have a place here. I'm going to teach you because you wanted a book once and nobody gave you one. I'm giving you this one." Ren stared at the book. His eyes filled with tears again, but this time he did not try to hide them. That afternoon they sat together at the big table. The general showed Ren how to read the symbols for mountains and rivers and forests. He explained how the border lines were drawn and why some kingdoms were allies and some were enemies. Ren asked questions. At first his questions were quiet and careful like he was afraid of asking too many. But the general answered every single one without sighing or rolling his eyes or telling Ren he was annoying. So Ren asked more questions. And more. And by the time the afternoon light started to fade to gray outside the narrow windows, Ren had learned more about the world in 4 hours than he had learned in 17 years. Marta brought them supper on a tray. Bread and cheese and hot soup with chunks of potato and herbs. They ate at the big table with the maps spread out around them and the fire warm at their backs. Ren dipped his bread in his soup and listened to the general talk about a sea that was so far north it froze solid in winter and people could walk across it to other lands. "I would like to see that someday," Ren said quietly. "A frozen sea." The general looked at him and something shifted in his ice-colored eyes. "Maybe you will. The world is bigger than one cold castle and one mean house." That night Ren went back to his small room with the window and the soft rug and the feather mattress. He carried the book of maps with him. He set it carefully on the little table beside his bed. Before he blew out the candle, he opened it to a page that showed a warm southern country with drawings of orange trees and blue water. He touched the picture with his fingertip. He thought about the general's story. About Aldrich and the knife and the men who died. He thought about how the general had been alone for 7 years because he was afraid of being hurt again. And he thought about how the general had still reached across the table and held his bandaged hand. Wren blew out the candle and lay in the dark. The wind had picked up outside and he could hear it whistling around the towers. But inside his room it was warm. His hands did not hurt as much as they had yesterday. His stomach was full. And for the first time in 17 years, Wren fell asleep without crying. The weeks that followed were the strangest and most wonderful of Wren's entire life. He woke every morning in his own room with a window that looked out at the pine trees. He ate breakfast with Marta in the warm kitchen while she told him stories about the castle and the soldiers and the time a goat got loose in the great hall and ate one of the general's maps. He spent his afternoons in the study learning about geography and history and military strategy from a man who had once seemed like a monster made of ice and stone but who now laughed at Wren's jokes and brought him tea when his voice got tired from asking too many questions. But not everyone was happy about this change. Soren had gone back to their mother's house after being thrown out into the storm. He had walked through the rain with his expensive clothes ruined and his pride even more ruined. And Soren was not the kind of person who forgot an embarrassment. He was the kind of person who nursed it like a sick baby animal until it grew into something big and dangerous. Back at the family house, Elara was furious. Not at Soren for trying to steal silver spoons. Not at Soren for lying to a general of the kingdom. She was furious at Wren for telling the truth. How dare he, she said one evening as she paced the floor of their fine sitting room. The fire was high and warm because Elara never let herself be cold. Soren sat in the best chair with a cup of wine and a scowl on his handsome face. How dare that useless boy embarrass us in front of General Draven? Do you know what people are saying in the village? They are saying we sent the wrong son. They are saying we mistreated the Omega boy. They are looking at us differently. Soren swirled his wine and stared into the dark red liquid. It does not matter what the villagers say. What matters is that Wren is living in a castle wearing fine clothes and eating good food while I am stuck here with nothing to do but listen to you complain. Then do something about it, Elara snapped. You are the alpha. You are the one with the brains and the strength. Figure out a way to remind everyone which son matters. Soren was quiet for a long time. Then his sharp smile returned. It was the smile that looked kind from far away but turned cruel when you got close. I have an idea. But I will need money. A lot of money. That was how it began. Soren took the coins his mother gave him and he traveled north. Not toward the general's castle, but toward the border where the kingdom's old enemy lived. The kingdom of Valtros had been quiet for many years but everyone knew they were still angry about losing the last war. Their soldiers trained in secret. Their generals watched the border with hungry eyes. And Soren knew exactly what they wanted most. They wanted a way into the castle of General Salis Draven. They wanted to defeat the Winter Wolf who had beaten them so badly in the last war that they still told stories about it to frighten their children. Soren did not care about wars or kingdoms or loyalty. He only cared about one thing. He wanted Wren to suffer. He wanted the general to suffer. He wanted everyone who had laughed at him to pay. And if that meant selling secrets to an enemy kingdom, well, that was just the price of his revenge. Back at the general's castle, Wren knew nothing of this. He was too busy learning and growing and healing. His hands had finally healed from the scrubbing and the bandages were gone. The cracks had closed and the skin was soft again thanks to a salve Marta made from herbs and beeswax. He no longer flinched when the general moved too fast. He no longer expected a slap every time someone raised their hand. He had started to smile more. Real smiles, not the tight nervous ones he used to wear like a mask. One afternoon Wren was in the study alone. The general had been called away to inspect the border fortifications and would not return until evening. Wren was reading a book about the history of the kingdom when he heard a strange sound. It was a flutter of wings outside the window. He looked up and saw a small gray bird perched on the sill. Tied to its leg was a tiny metal tube. Wren's heart began to beat faster. He had learned enough from the general's maps and lessons to know that messenger birds were used for important communications. But this bird was not one of the royal birds with their bright bands and official seals. This bird was plain and unmarked. It was a secret bird. Very carefully Wren opened the window and took the bird in his hands. It was tame and did not fight him. He removed the tiny tube from its leg and unrolled the scrap of paper inside. The message was written in a messy hand that Wren recognized immediately. It was Soren's handwriting. He had seen it on letters and lists around the house for years. The message said only this. The tunnel beneath the east wall is unguarded after midnight. The general will be away inspecting the northern watch. Come then. Bring the gold. Wren's blood turned to ice in his veins. The tunnel beneath the east wall. He knew about that tunnel because the general had shown it to him on a map just last week. It was an old escape route built 100 years ago in case the castle was ever surrounded. Only a handful of people knew it still existed. And now Soren was telling the enemies of the kingdom exactly how to get inside. Rin did not panic. The old Rin would have panicked. The old Rin would have hidden in his room and hoped the problem went away. But the new Rin had spent weeks learning from the Winter Wolf himself. He carefully put the message back in the tube and tied it to the bird's leg. He opened the window and let the bird fly away. Then he went to find Marta. The general needs to come back, Rin said calmly. Right now. It is an emergency. Marta saw the look in Ren's eyes and did not ask questions. She sent a rider on the fastest horse in the stable. General Salis Draven returned before sundown. His face was grim as Rin told him everything. About the bird. About the message. About Soren's handwriting and his brother's desperate hunger for revenge. He is selling the castle to the enemy, Rin finished. He wants to hurt you because you humiliated him. And he wants to hurt me because I finally stopped being his punching bag. The general was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something that surprised Rin. He smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a wolf who had just spotted a rabbit wandering into its den. Your brother thinks he is clever, the general said. But he made one mistake. He wrote down his plan and sent it on a bird that flies over my land. And he told the enemy to come at midnight. That gives us plenty of time to prepare a welcome party. That night the castle looked like it was sleeping. The lights were dim. The guards walked their normal routes. Anyone watching from the forest would have thought it was just another quiet night in the northern fortress. But inside the walls, 50 of the general's best soldiers were hidden in the shadows near the east tunnel. Their swords were sharp. Their armor was silent. And they were waiting. Rin stood beside the general near the entrance to the tunnel. He was wearing the green cloak with the rabbit fur lining and his heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his ears. He was not a fighter. He had never held a sword in his life. But he was not going to hide in his room while his brother tried to destroy the only place that had ever felt like home. You should wait in the study, the general said quietly. This could get bloody. No, Rin said. His voice was steady. He is my brother. I need to see this through. The general looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Midnight came. The castle bell tolled 12 times and then fell silent. For a long terrible moment nothing happened. Rin wondered if he had read the message wrong. Maybe Soren had changed the plan. Maybe the enemy had gotten suspicious. Then he heard it. A soft scraping sound from inside the tunnel. The sound of boots on old stone. The sound of hushed voices speaking a language Rin did not understand. The first enemy soldier emerged from the tunnel entrance. He was big and bearded and he carried a curved sword that glinted in the faint torchlight. He looked around cautiously and saw nothing. He waved his hand and more soldiers began to pour out of the tunnel. 10 of them. Then 20. Then 30. They moved quietly like shadows, spreading out into the castle's lower level. And walking right in the middle of them, holding a heavy bag of gold coins, was Soren. He looked different than he had on the night of the storm. His fine clothes were dirty from crawling through the tunnel. His slick back hair was messy and damp with sweat. But his eyes were the same. Sharp and greedy and full of hate. The last enemy soldier cleared the tunnel entrance. And that was when the general stepped out of the shadows. Now, he said. His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. The hidden soldiers erupted from their hiding places. The tunnel entrance slammed shut with a heavy iron gate that dropped from the ceiling. The enemy soldiers were trapped between the gate and a wall of the kingdom's finest warriors. The fight was short and brutal. The enemy had been expecting a sleeping castle and unarmed servants. Instead they found 50 soldiers who had been waiting for them with sharp steel and cold fury. When it was over, the enemy soldiers were on their knees with their hands bound. And Soren was on his knees too, but not because anyone had forced him there. His legs had simply given out when he realized his plan had failed. The bag of gold coins had spilled across the stone floor and the coins glittered in the torchlight like tiny mocking eyes. Soren looked up and saw Rin standing beside the general. His face twisted with confusion and rage. You, Soren spat. You did this. You ruined everything. You were supposed to be the spare. You were supposed to be nothing. Rin walked forward until he was standing right in front of his brother. He looked down at Soren and for the first time in his life he did not feel small. He did not feel afraid. He felt something else entirely. He felt free. I did not ruin anything, Rin said quietly. You ruined yourself. You could have stayed home and forgotten about me. You could have moved on with your life. But you could not stand the thought of me being happy. So you sold your own kingdom to its enemies. You are a traitor, Soren. And everyone will know it. The next day Soren was dragged before the king's court in the capital. The general and Rin traveled together in a proper carriage this time, not a bumpy supply wagon. Ren wore his green cloak and sat with his back straight and his head high. The great hall of the palace was huge and golden and filled with people. Nobles in fine clothes whispered and pointed as Soren was brought in wearing chains. Elara was there too, standing near the back, her face pale as milk. She had tried to distance herself from Soren when she heard what he had done. She had told everyone that she had no idea her son was a traitor. Nobody believed her. The king sat on his throne looking down at Soren with disgust. You sold the location of a secret tunnel to our enemies. You conspired to murder a general of this kingdom. You did all of this because your brother was treated kindly while you were not. Is that correct? Soren said nothing. His face was blank with shock. The king turned to Ren. You are the brother. The one who was sent in his place. What do you believe should be done with this traitor? The hall went silent. Everyone looked at Ren. The small Omega boy in the green cloak. The one who had been called Spare and Disposable and Weeping Willow. The one who had scrubbed floors until his hands bled. Ren took a deep breath. He thought about everything Soren had done. The pushing down the stairs. The stolen silver spoons. The lies and the cruelty and the years of being treated like nothing. He thought about what the general had told him about Aldrich. About how making someone suffer did not heal your own wounds. I do not want him dead, Ren said. His voice carried across the silent hall. Death would be too easy. Death would mean he does not have to think about what he did. I want him sent to the northern mines. I want him to wake up every morning in the cold and the dark and work until his hands are rough and cracked. I want him to know what it feels like to be disposable. The king nodded slowly. A fitting punishment. It shall be done. Soren was dragged away screaming. He screamed at Ren. He screamed at his mother. He screamed at the guards. But nobody listened. The doors closed behind him and the hall was quiet again. That evening Ren and the general stood on the balcony of the castle's highest tower. The sun was setting and the sky was streaked with pink and gold and deep purple. The pine trees below were dusted with fresh snow and the world looked peaceful and clean. Are you sad about your brother? The general asked. Ren leaned against the stone railing and watched the colors change in the sky. I am sad about the brother I never had. I am sad that he chose hate over everything else. But I am not sad that he is gone. I am relieved. The general moved closer until his shoulder was touching Ren's. You showed mercy today. Many people in your position would have asked for his head. You asked for justice instead. Was it mercy? Ren asked. Or was it just a different kind of revenge? The general thought about it for a moment. Maybe it was both. But that is all right. You earned the right to choose. Ren turned and looked up at the general. His ice-colored eyes were soft in the fading light. His scarred face was relaxed and calm. He looked nothing like the cold monster Ren had been so afraid of on that first day. Thank you, Ren said quietly. For everything. For the bed and the food and the book of maps. For believing me when I told the truth. For teaching me that I am not disposable. The general put his arm around Ren's shoulders. It was heavy and warm and it felt like safety. You never were disposable, he said. You just needed someone to see you. I see you, Ren. The last light faded from the sky and the first stars began to appear. Somewhere far away in a cold northern mine, Soren was beginning his first night of punishment. But here in the castle on the hill, Ren stood with the general and watched the stars come out and felt something he had never felt before. He felt like he belonged. And the general who had once been called the Winter Wolf, the man who had been betrayed and scarred and left alone in a cold stone fortress for 7 years, looked down at the boy beside him and felt his frozen heart finally begin to thaw. They stayed on the balcony until the moon was high and silver and the whole world below them was quiet. Two people who had been broken by different storms but who had found shelter in each other. And they lived in that castle together, not as general and disposable helper, but as something much simpler and much rarer. They lived as family. If you enjoyed this story of Ren and General Salis, please share it with someone who loves tales of healing hearts and quiet courage. Subscribe for more stories where the gentle ones find their strength and the cold ones find their warmth.